Thank you, ma'am.
Judith, I have all the maps. We don't get to the on the screen.
No, she was, I thought it was.
We're starting in here and then we're going, we'll be in here for that.
You want to
Ron,
start on your opening slide, right?
Please.
I don't know what's showing there, but let me, hold on.
Do we have this one already?
Yes, I will say, you know, if people.
Yeah, maybe put it down into the email, send it to the couple.
Okay. Oh, Ron, why am I? Hello.
Exhibit, although it's long, it looks beautiful in our contemporary setting, because it's clean, you know? It's not like she's like, well, stop. It's like, it's very fresh.
Ron, I don't know why there's feedback.
Rachel, she has to be loose. Because you have the sound on your phone.
I muted your phone.
Right.
Okay, so now we're good? Great.
You know,
You need to get
I'm thinking there may be a bit, I
want to know when you went to rebellion school, if they
I
taught
really
you
bet.
these things on
Oh,
the
it's still
computer.
about right?
Okay. Great, all right. We're live? All right, we are live. Great to see everyone. Those of you who are in the room, we're so happy to have you here for our last session on art and antiquities and the Jewish experience. We have been blessed to have guest speakers with us. I'm showing it. No, don't worry, Lori, I have it on a slide too, so we're good. Okay, yes, all right. So those of you who are watching online, and we're gonna let you in, we'll keep an eye, Ron, you'll just have to keep an eye on the waiting room to let people in. We have an exciting class today. We'll be starting in the Beit Midrash here with some maps, which I'll share on the screen. And then we will be getting up and walking over to the exhibit. And those of you who are on Zoom, you will be able to see the exhibit as well. So Judith, if you're ready to begin, I'm gonna share your first map, which is the Crucible of Civilization from National Geographic. Judith has many talents. Among them is a beloved English teacher at Spanish River High School. So she's educated generations and generations of kids. And her late husband, Steve Beiner, were collectors of antiquities. And they have been blessed to give those antiquities to Temple Bethel, and we are. And Ron, you need to let me share. You got to remove the spotlight. Okay, we are lucky to be the recipient of them. And so today we're going to have a tour of those antiquities. But before we do that, we're going to get a little education through maps. So the first map, Judith, I will share and we will take it away.
This one is the important one. The others are, no, this one, you don't have this one, because I couldn't miniaturize it, but the others will give you, information also. Ooh. We may have to run on some more.
Let me share it from you.
Okay, all right,
Give me 1 second. Hold on. It's not showing from there, so let's.
okay, you have all been working from 4 in the morning in a little corner of Megiddo, which I'll talk about later. You have a little square, you have a little dust broom and a little dustpan, and you are there before the blazing sun in your little square, and you are just moving the sand very carefully, moving it from one place to the other. And all of a sudden you hit something and you go, oh my God. and you call the director of your little area over, and he or she stands over you while you unearth a treasure. When I dug at Megiddo and they put me in an iron, we'll talk about the Iron Age again briefly. They put me in a little area and I kept digging up bones. And I said, oh my God, what am I finding? And the director said, oh, you're at the kitchen. He's at the old chicken bone. Nonetheless, they were 2,000-year-old chicken bones. So, but this is your treasure. It has this around. It's probably, I've been sort of testing it. You sort of kind of spit on it, see how long. It was used, and again, when we get out there, we'll talk about it. Pass it around. Don't worry about it. It's very similar to this. This is a different one. This I'm talking about another point. These they were started in the late Bronze, early Iron Age, and they went all the way through the Roman period.
Was this chick drink?
No, it's an oil lamp. It's an oil lamp, and we'll talk about it. Yeah, that's where the wick was. Okay, I'm going to show you this and just point out some features that I've underlined. First of all, very, very sadly, I did want to show you the Gaza Strip, which is really difficult to see here, but it's here, the Gaza Strip, and just the things you know about. This is Communist, and this is the Rafah crossing, and this little tiny minuscule thing is where so many thousands of lives have been lost already. Now, archaeologically, we start down in the Negev and Paran. Do any of you know the wilderness of Paran, which is where Sarah said to Abraham, oh, I have a nice girl for you, and encouraged him to marry Hagar, and then later on turned them away. And they have found some things in this wilderness of Paran. Right across from it, have any of you been to Petra?
Yeah.
Well, so you know, magnificent Nabatean, it started about 300, BC, Nabatean, and they went on, eventually, the civilization was overtaken by other, forces, but of course, it still survived. If you go there, it's unreal. When we got to the earlier periods, which we'll talk about, we found a great many pieces in the Beersheba, in this whole Negev area. And this is where we found a lot of
I'm there on the map.
Chalcolithic pieces, Neolithic pieces, which is sort of below. We're not going to discuss that. We will start with Chalcolithic. But through that area, there were a great many finds. Bethlehem. Then if we go across to Jordan, because when we look at Holy Land archaeology, we have to realize that there was a great deal of trade. So and we will see pieces in the exhibit that probably came from Cyprus. There was a huge amount of trade with the Egyptians. And some of the early pieces the archaeologist, and I'm gonna talk about, Amiran in a minute. She and her teams really felt that some of the discoveries that were made in areas like Megiddo and Bet Shean actually came from Egypt. We will see some of those. If we go further, of course, we have Caesarea or Caesarea, as they pronounce it there. And that, of course, is Herod's, and we'll talk about King Herod, and that was his summer palace. His winter palace was closer to Jerusalem.
And this weekend, I'll just tell you, Caesarea is a very wealthy area, so when the Holoprince, we did luncheon this weekend, when the speaker came in at lunch, he said, this is so fancy, he said, this is the Caesarea of Florida, where you are, then he understood where he was, the very few with aqueducts and.
A sad story about Caesarea and archaeology in general, and I may have mentioned this last time. We were taken, my husband and I were fortunate enough to know a lot of people through our gallery and through connections we had made. And we were taken into the one of the storerooms in Caesarea by one of the archaeologists. And there are shelves and boxes and boxes. Remember, if you find a feather when you're digging, you label it and you put it away. And these pieces were, I mean, an entire storeroom. And he said, they won't see the light of day until we have funding.
Oh.
And he said, funding is just you beg and you babble, and sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't, but if you don't have funding, you can't publish. And there is so much in the field, in the archaeological world that has never seen the light of day because the funding just doesn't exist. That it's kind of sad. If we go further up, here's Megiddo, and of course, many of the pieces that have been found are from Megiddo and Bet Shean, and I'm going to talk a little more about those when we get there. And again, there we have Madaba, I don't know if you can see it, and Mount Nebo, where, of course, Moses stood looking over. And if any of you, Madaba has this amazing map, mosaic map. And if any of you have been to Mount Nebo, you stand there and you look across and there's Israel, clear as day. And you say, oh, poor guy.
An easy
40
target.
years he schlepped around, you know, it was insulted, was put upon, and he never made it.
Right.
But you guys, well, these days, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a beautiful view, but it's strategically advantageous to Israel's enemies. That's part of the problem with the North.
Yeah.
Even though the war has started in Gaza, the North is getting a lot of assets as well.
So, we are filled with archaeological sites. Many of them are what we call tells, which look like mesas. They're flat hills. And if you drive through Israel, you will see a lot of these tells that have not yet been, and that's stratified archaeology. You start at the top, you destroy the top layer, and you keep going down. Now, this book, and you have a sample page, if any of you
Should I go to the next slide?
Okay. So the two maps that I gave you were just, you can see a lot of the sites we were talking about. But this, well, here, take these two. I only printed television, so, yeah. Ruth Amiran. This book was for many years gold. It was printed in, I have, this English copy, and I also have a copy of it in Hebrew. It was from, the Hebrew edition was from 1963. And the reason, and at some point, you couldn't get this book for under $200. I mean, that's how valuable it was. Now you go on eBay and they're like $20, but, she was the first person in the archaeological world. I mean, there were archaeologists way before Petrie and many, but she was the first person to say pottery, and the collection we have is pottery. Pottery is the key to understanding antiquity and to understanding when things happened. And so.
Can you expand on that? Why? Why is pottery the key to understanding history?
Because you can look at a piece and from when you dig, okay, so remember, you're digging down. You will look at a piece, and when you get to the bottom layer of certain things, you will compare. I mean, she was not just talking about one site. She was talking about Bet Shean and Megiddo and Lachish and Dor and Dan and many, the whole, oh, we don't have it up anymore, but the whole,
I put the book up. Do you want the map back up?
Okay.
You want
The
the,
whole Gasulian area, which was down here, the Beersheba and the Gasulian area. So she said, we can classify pieces according to, okay, I don't need it, I'll use the book. And she perceived an order, and her order was this. Bowl, this is how she labeled things, and this is how she showed them. So if you look at her book, and what I gave you were calcolithic pieces. If you notice, everything has, and these are drawn to size. One, I think these are 1 to 5. The bigger ones are, 1 to 10, and the very small ones are 1 to 2 in terms of ratio. But everything is drawn with a definitive line, with the possibility of different tops. All of these talk about where the piece was found. And the book, I mean, it just goes through, it's only biblical. I mean, it doesn't go to the Roman period and stuff. But she has classified almost everything that's come out of the ground. And she's put them in an order. She said bowl, chalice, you all know what a chalice is, goblet, which is a drinking thing, a crater, which is a larger vessel, a cooking pot, a pithos, which is a two-handled vase-like thing, a jar, an amphoriscos, which is a small jar with handles, a jug, a juglet, a pilgrim flask, and pilgrim flasks were very, very important because they survived well into Christianity, because the pilgrims would fill them with liquids and take them on their journeys, and lamps. And this is how she classified everything. And she changed the face of academic archaeology, because you would pick up a piece, collection, you would pick up a piece, and if you were a true study, this is what you would say. Now, yeah,
When they, I mean, I know that things that when they're found earlier, I'm not sure how they determine what year or how they decide. I
well,
know it's layers, but they have to look at the piece, or do now, or if they find things, do they use like x-rays and equipment like that?
when she started, it was not quite as easy. She just did it by comparison of things that were known. Then they started, now today, there are many ways to determine. One of the most common ways is called a TL test, thermoluminescence. And this is a test, you take a piece like that, and you send it to some place that's really, Oxford is the big one, and then there's a place in Connecticut. They're expensive. The test is several $100s. They bore a little tiny hole in the piece, and this is pottery, mostly anything that has pottery material attached to it. You can't do it on glass. That's a whole other thing. And you extract that and you put it under this machine, and then the machine will tell you, using heat and light, will date the piece within 200
Wow.
years. And you say, well, 200 years, but if you're looking at a 3,500-year-old piece, 2,000 years is pretty good.
200. Just, I'm conscious of time because we have to get out.
Oh, yeah, okay, 2 more minutes. Now, we bought a piece for our gallery. It was Asian, and from an auction house in California. We brought it, and with anything Asian, the first thing you do is have a TL tested, no matter who you buy it from. And of course, we sent it away, and the guy said, well, the front half of your horse is Ming Dynasty or Han Dynasty, whatever, and the back end of your horse is 1950 or so.
Oh my God.
So the piece went back. Yeah, they'll, if you, we've had that. Now, just one other thing about that. When you buy something in any place, but particularly if you're walking in the old city and you stop at Mr. Barakat's store, the Barakat family is the first family of, I don't know if they call themselves Palestinian, but they're Muslim. And they have stores all over the old city. And in the old days, when you went to Bethlehem, there was always a Barakat antiquities store that they took you to, and they gave you tea. And once you accept a cup of tea from an Arab dealer, you have to buy something. It's the Barakats, and I think I mentioned in my last lecture, they're all over the world now. One son has a place on Rodeo Drive that sells stuff that's unbelievable. But the Barakats would come to the auction. My friend Robert had one of the biggest auctions in Tel Aviv twice a year, and they would walk in, and old man Barakat and his sons would sit in the first row of the place. Now, why is that unusual? Because if any of you have ever been to a major auction, at Christie's or at Sotheby's, you will see that the movers and shakers, the people who are really buying, stand in the back. They don't even sit. They stand in the back because they want to read the room for these sales. But Mr. Father Barakat and his sons would sit in the first row, never turn around. If they wanted something, they didn't even hold the paddles, they just nodded or whatever. And he was a fixture for many, many, many years. So this is one of his certificates of authenticity. We take these with a grain of salt. Yes.
So this auction, who is running it and how do they procure the items?
So we have to get outside. Can we hold questions to them? Is that okay?
Oh,
Because
all right.
we have to get outside.
Okay, then
To do the
let's
live.
go and I'll
Do
finish.
you want me to show the other two maps or?
No, the other two maps are just, they're just for, they're sort of blow-ups of that one, just to
Okay.
show.
If you can ask a question at the end.
Can I, should I take my stuff out with me?
Yeah, if you want, yeah.
If you're gonna use it.
Yeah, we'll come back.
There are chairs out there,
Yeah, there are chairs. Yeah.
So we may need more chairs.
Do we need our, are we coming back?
I don't know if we're coming back here.
You can leave your stuff here. If we have time, you can finish up the lecture here, but we're,
Oh, okay.
but we have people on Zoom, so we're gonna get started. Go ahead.
How many people are there? We may need more chairs.
It's really wonderful when we get together, you know. And I have to really talk to you about something that's on my mind.
And if there's not enough seats, you can grab a chair from over there. And Judith, start, because we.
Get around here.
Everyone online, can you hear us okay? Thumbs up? Judith, thumbs up? Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We are looking at pottery. Again, with the exception of a couple of pieces of Roman glass, and I will explain Roman glass to you. All of these pieces were found in digs. Two of the most expansive digs were at Megiddo. Have any of you been to Megiddo? Okay,
Yes.
And I showed you where they are on the map. Archaeological work at Megiddo it is still going on. The other name for Megiddo was Armageddon.
Oh.
And people really believed that this was where Armageddon would occur. This would be the end of the world. And the first, now I'm looking at these pieces in general. I know we'll talk about the time periods. Some of these may have come from Megiddo. I don't have that paperwork anymore. These have been, they were supplied to Stephen and me by our friend Usama. His name is Usama Taha. He is a dear friend. Rabbi Dan is friends with him. He's an antiquities and coin dealer in the old city. And the story behind this is my late husband and I were very involved in American Jewish Committee for many years. And Rabbi Singer was the rabbi who also was involved with us. And in his honor, and he had met Sammy too, and in his honor, we put together this collection to honor his commitment to friendship, understanding, and the beauty of our history from the beginning of times. So the earliest excavations in Megiddo were started by the Germans. The Germans were big archaeologists. They did tremendous things on the Silk Road. If you ever go to any of the Berlin museums. But the earliest ones here, they were run by a man named Gottlieb Schumacher and later Ernest Sellen, and they started between 1903 and 1905. So, and it's still going on today. That's the thing with Megiddo. They just keep digging and they just keep finding things. And I think Stephen and I dug there maybe 15 years ago, but we were there later, and they're still digging. And so we're going to see, when we talk about the individual pieces, again, you start at the top, and as you go down, probably the earliest pieces will be Chalcolithic, and then we're going to talk about this. The other place is Bet Shean, which more than Megiddo is just beautiful columns and mosaics. But again, they have found a dining room, they have found a kitchen, as they have found in many other places. It was called Sycopolis in ancient times. And it's located in the northern Jordan Valley. I'm sure some of you have been there. It was very important in Roman and Byzantine times, and that's why we have found a lot of mosaics there. University of Pennsylvania is pretty big there. Okay, now let's take a look at the pieces. There is a Neolithic period, which is, cavemen and cavewomen and whatever that did. Gina wrote a whole book series about what was it called? Something.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Where they were very clever.
I
But
love
anyway,
that.
we're not starting that. We're starting at the Chalcolithic period. Now, what is very interesting, and I have some notes, the lead chandler. Okay. Now, again, you'd say, oh God, minutia, but that lead chandle determined, now we have this labeled as Chalcolithic. This is how the original labeling was, and we kept it that way. I would, looking at it now and doing further research, move it here. I would move it to what's called early bronze, but we kept it as Chalcolithic because when you're talking about 5,000, 8,000 years ago, if you miss a date or two, it's.
Well, can you tell us what leads you to the reclassification of that?
Okay, the ledge handle is a primary, if you go to, if you go to, I'm going to read you something about that just answer this question. What are the boundaries of the area in which the ledge handle is found, and especially what is its northern boundary? Albright, who first approached this subject, proposed on the basis of a service survey to regard the Jezreel Valley as the northern boundary. Since then, excavations carried out in sites north of the Jezreel Valley, and they list a whole bunch of sites, says this is where they were found. And it says, the home of the ledge handle is most probably in the south of Palestine, and from the very beginning, it seems to have had more than one form. And again, she has in here plates with 16 different ledge handles. And the further north we move, the less frequent they become. But she seems to feel, Amiran, that the ledge handle was, if not late Chalcolithic, early Bronze period. And this incense burner is definitely Chalcolithic. So we date this 5,500 to 6,000 BCE. Yeah.
What is the function of the ledge?
The ledge handle appeared on various pieces. So in this case, it was partly decorative, but partly you put your fingers or your hands on that and you could lift it, because if you notice, this has a spout. So you were able to lift it and turn turn the spout. And this was filled most likely with oil.
It's a handle.
It's a handle. It's a wedge handle, and it is a handle, yes. The incense burner, very common. Did you have a question?
You know what, I just wanna know, you say you start from the top and go down, so how many feet down are we talking here for the oldest basin?
Well, if you figure a tell, if you look at a tell, if you've driven, it looks like not an Alp or a Rockies, but it's a flat piece, which is a couple of 100 feet high, not thousands. And you're digging below, remember, you're going, so each level could be.
Garbage Island south of here, it looks like that, an unnatural mountain.
And each
But it doesn't
level,
smell.
remember, once you destroy the first level, now there's air above you, you're not working with the roof. So I don't know how many feet exactly, but you're going down from Mount Trashmore, as
That's it.
down several levels into the earth. Remember, there's bedrock, so you get to a point in the bedrock and you just can't go any further. But it's painstaking, it's years long, as we said, they started excavating Megiddo in 1900 and Bet Shean not long after that. And some of the others, like the Kazuli and Beersheba were even dug earlier, were dug in the there were archaeologists hanging around in the 1800s in the Holy Land.
Britain was really big in that. The British were really.
Yeah, the British, the Germans, yeah, the Brits were the big ones, yeah, and the Germans also. Now these were put in here. These were actually picked up by Rabbi Singer on one of his trips.
There's also a stone in the mausoleum from Bethel as well,
Oh,
from the
really?
biblical Bethel, yeah.
And he carried these back from Bethel, Israel. And the biblical, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down on that place. And he called the name of that place Bethel. So that's the biblical, it's from Genesis chapter 28. And these could be 1,000,000 years old. I mean, they're stones. We don't know. I'm not even sure they could be tested, but they have found pieces that are 500,000 years old and stuff in the earth. So, except very interestingly, you can't date stuff like this and talk to an ultra-Orthodox person, because I have had them come into my gallery and I've had the dates and they said that's wrong because it's 5784 and it can't be any earlier because that's when the earth began. So you say, okay, okay, my Uncle Moshe made it. I had started and I didn't finish. Just let me. You take certificates of authenticity, not with a grain of salt. You want to trust the person. And most of these pieces, like that, the ornament that we were passing around, they're real. They're not. But again, you need that a lot of times when you take the piece out of the country. In the old days, when customs really went through your suitcases, it was important because to this day, Israel is one of the very few places in the world which allows you to take its artifacts. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but Cambodia is demanding its pieces back, and this country is a big thing. What Israel does is if something is found on a dig, it is brought to the Antiquities Authority. The Antiquities Authority looks at it, examines it, determines its authenticity, and says, oh, we have 55 of these, and puts it on the market. And if you're a licensed dealer, you get a petek, a paper, and you can sell it and it can be taken out. If you find something that's really amazing, they will say, thank you very much, and put it in the Israel Museum or in the Tel Aviv Museum. So, but if you have these papers, you can legally take them out of the country. Okay, now we move over to the early Bronze Age. This was the time of the Canaanites. These are just in the Middle Bronze Age. Well, the early Bronze Age were Canaanites, and we know the story of Joshua at the Battle of Jericho, and it was supposed to be around this time. Again, there is a little question about that, but the early bronze pieces, a lot of them were found in Jericho and in Megiddo. And a lot of pieces, interestingly, sort of had the same style and shape as pieces from the Old Kingdom in Egypt. So even back thousands of years, there was trade between the societies. And during this period, the first cities were built. So you do have kitchens, you have storerooms. And when we move to the Middle Bronze Age, we start getting into the patriarchal period. And by the time we get to the Late Bronze Age, this is the period of Aaron, of Moses, of Joshua. And if you notice, the pieces, although that's a pretty sophisticated looking piece, they now start taking shapes with not lug handles, as we talked about, but regular handles. And one of the determinations of period is where the handle starts and where it ends. So in the Late Bronze Age, that's called, the bottom of that handle where it's attached is called the shoulder of the piece. And it goes up to below the rim. If we go a little later to the Iron Age, we notice that again, it starts on the shoulder, but it goes to the rim. It actually is part of the rim. Yeah.
So far, I'm noticing that these are all utilitarian pieces. Is there some point where decorative pieces?
Oh, there were pieces, if you ever get a hold of the catalog from the Israel Museum, there are amazing, amazing pieces. This just happened to be the collection that, we were able to put together.
Is the composition of all of these indigenous clay?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the potter's wheel, and I'm going to discuss that in a minute. It is indigenous clay or terracotta. I'm going to talk about that in 1 minute. I just want to get through this. So, but you notice now, this is an early oil lamp. Oil lamps of this period went all the way through Rome. The way it worked is you put oil in the base of it, and it'll look at very different oil lamps further on. You put oil in the base, and you put a wick where that thing is, a piece of string or whatever, and lit it, and then the wick, the oil just seeped up into the wick, and it was able to burn. And this one was actually used because we can see the black part. Now let me talk a little. The pottery wheel started in the Bronze Age. So it actually started around 3300 BCE, according to the research that I've done. And it revolutionized pottery because, again, this was beautiful, and this was done by hand, and these were done by hand. But if you look, you can see the indentation marks from the wheel. Have any of you tried working on a potter's wheel?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have more luck than I do, but it is.
Takes a lot of practice.
Takes a lot of practice. It's really, really tough. And, but apparently there were enough, and I'm assuming they were men, there were enough men, potters, to produce it. Now, they were able to do it faster. They were able to do it with more accuracy. Just briefly, because we're not about to go make a wheel. It started with the collection of local mud or dirt, or whatever you want to call it. And there were a lot of clay deposits in the Holy Land, in these places I've shown you. And once the clay was collected, they needed it. And if any of you were there Saturday watching him, Sunday at the luncheon, watching him knead the dough, well, think of doing that to be able to make something like this. I just want to watch my time because I want to get the glass off. Then they took it and they put the glob, after they had kneaded it, in the center of the wheel. And today, of course, wheels are, machine driven, but then it was, a pedal, and you go kind of like this, if you have any talent at all. Yeah. And they came out, of course, with these shapes. And then when you look at these clothes after the thing, you can see how on some of them, they actually, some of them were, this one looks like it was attached, but this one actually looks like he was able to bring it out right from the thing. So they shaped it, they trimmed it. There were some that were decorated. When we get to the very last thing, the Mamluk period, something I have to remind you of that you don't see. These gorgeous statues when you go to the museum, these big Roman statues, and they're marble. They were all painted. Every one of them was gloriously painted. And what you see is a white.
We're good. We don't.
A white statue. But so many of these also had what is called a slip or a burnish, which is sort of like not exactly a paint, but a liquid that was poured over them. And when it went into the kiln, it stuck to the piece, and the piece was gorgeous, shiny, beautiful. Some of them were decorated. A lot of them had these gorgeous slips. But after a few thousand years. Yeah, it did that too, right. Because that was very important, because these all obviously were for liquids. The smaller ones, by the way, like these, were probably used, they were put in, you had big storage vats for grains and even for other liquids.
We only have 12 minutes, just
We
so
have
you know.
12 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So these were put in and they were used as measuring cups. And that's how they were used. Now, this is a particularly beautiful one and very clearly Iron Age 2, which is the late period, which is right before 586, right before the temple was destroyed. It's particularly beautiful because it has the double rim. So that was a very...
Just for clarification, Abraham is around 1800 BC.
Yeah, that's here.
Yeah, so that's
here.
that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let me move over here.
Think that the first potters were married.
I don't know. I have no idea, but if they were hunter-gatherers, the earliest ones were hunter-gatherers. The women probably did with whatever they brought. In later, because I've never seen a picture of a woman potter in any of the books, but I don't know. It's very possible. But every archaeology book that I have shows the man. I know in pre-Columbian times, they were the men who made these unbelievable.
You said that they put in kilns, so what kind of technology did they use?
It was heat. They used firing. I had it. And yeah, well, they had two different, now you have different. These kilns were pits that were dug into the ground, and they had very hot coals, and they stood on like trays, and they were able to fire them in pits.
We just have 10 minutes if you want to get through the rest. Sorry.
Okay, all right.
Judith will hang at the end for those in person. So
We go on
ask
Iron
questions.
Age. These are not from my collection, but these are fascinating. These are Babylonian stones. These were in hieroglyphics and in all kinds of ancient languages. This is how you conducted business. These were marriage contracts. Very fast, because she's rushing me. We were at an auction where one of these was a divorce contract.
Wow.
And my husband and Alan Dershowitz were bidding against each other for it. Neither of them got it. Somebody else, the brother of somebody, I forget who got it, but some of them they're not terribly much larger than the big one, but they're fabulously written. Many of them also contain spells for fertility or for let's get rid of this guy, kind of like stone voodoo dolls. So they were wonderful. Now, if we go on to the if we go on to this piece, we notice when we get to the
Gorgeous.
period, things almost start looking Grecian. And in the Hellenic time frame, the Hasmonean period, there were people who decided to take Greek names, and while they were Jews, the Maccabees and everything, they started to produce things that looked very different from these. And again, some of the pieces are magnificent, you know. This is a cooking pot, and this is from the time of King Herod. So it's Roman, the Romans were there for years and years and years. Again, you can see it's wheel made. And Herod, for those of you who don't know, was a lunatic of the first order. He was paranoid. He had his wife killed. He had
And
his
pickled
son
in honey.
killed.
And she was pickled in honey. He had her killed and then pickled in honey.
Oh, really? And he built, of course, all the wonderful temples, and the retaining wall that we have left is the retaining wall from one of the temples. And again, Caesarea and the places in Jerusalem. All right, now, let me go fast. Roman glass. This was developed by the Romans, obviously. They used silica, they used sand, and they used carbon something or other. Whatever they used, they were products that were, oh, by the way, see, that's a different shape oil lamp. You see, that's more closed. You still pour the oil in, you still have the wick, and you can still see that that was used as well. But they evolved. We'll look here. So the glass was made using silica, using different chemicals, And if any of you in Jerusalem, you're taken sometimes to a glass blowing place. And it's not any different from the way, I mean, obviously, if you go up to Steuben or something, it's a whole different process, but they can still blow glass the way they did. And again, it was free blown. They had this long pipe and they shaped it and then they cooled it. I'm just not going to go through the whole process. What is really interesting is you see the top one, that's the color of the glass. This middle one with this gorgeous crustation on it, that's called a patina. And the patina adheres to the glass after it's been buried and put in the ground for umpteen years. Now, it breaks, and there's a huge business in Roman glass earrings, Roman glass necklaces. I carried a lot of them in my gallery, and when anybody came, I said, enjoy it, don't touch the patina, and don't take a shower with it on. Because if you take a shower with a piece that looks like that, when you get out of the shower, it will look like that.
Oh, wow.
So, but Roman glass, again, for thousands of years, and it's still being produced. And what do I have, 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Exactly.
In the last row here, we have the evolution of the oil lamps, the Islamic period, the Byzantine period, of course. This was no longer Jewish. I mean, it was, but Jews survived during all these periods. There was always a presence of Jews. And the Mishnah, Rabbi, was written
200 and Talmud is 500.
Yeah. So there were always Jewish learning. But what happened here is you now started to get even more impressive and even more artistic. So even the oil lamps moved from utilitarianism to decorative beauty. And again, both of these were lit, whether in antiquity or not, I'm not sure, but they both were lit. Finally, we get to the Mamluk period, and we're already moving into this Christianity has been established, and the church, Constantinople, all that is going on. So we leave Judaism, we never leave Judaism, but we see now that they have distinctive patterns and huge amounts of gorgeous mosaics, floors and palaces, and everything now becomes much more decorative, if you look, rather than utilitarian. This piece was used, but it was also used for beauty. Okay.
Mm-hmm. You want to wrap up? Do you want to?
Well, just to say that, again, the question was asked, were there other things made? Yes, the plethora of gorgeous palaces, ivories. If you've ever seen in King David, the city of David, the ivories that were found are magnificent. The woman in the window is one particular one. And during a lot of the Israelite period, the pieces, the palaces were so lavish that the Essenes, the really strictly Orthodox people complained that they were ruining the Jewish society. They were, that the people were no longer interested in God, but were more interested in beauty. And if you ever see these things, they're incredible. But this is the history of the people. This is the way we go from Clan of the Caveman all the way through Saladin and now, well, more than Alexander the Great, and Constantinople and Jesus. So we cover it, Amiran started it. It's gone through many more historic things, and you can become an archaeologist if you go to school and you want to dig with a little broom.
And those who are here in person, you're welcome to stay and talk with Judith. Those who are online, thank you for joining us. This has been incredible. And it's so beautiful. Please, yes, yes. We're going to say goodbye to those online. Thanks, Ron, our producer. And those here, you're welcome.